we are going to be doing our engine turning by using valve grinding compound, which is a variety of grits in a solution. This one is water-based. We are using a wooden dowel, which we have added a bolt to give us a way of mounting it in the lathe, in the drill press. We'll be using the raw end of the wood, which actually will become saturated with the grit and do the work for us. When this spins, of course, it doesn't spin perfectly concentric. It will wobble a little bit. So you want to find a pattern that is as big as your potential wobble, and find the dimension of that diameter, which is 2/3 to 3/4. In our case, we are going with about 1.5 inches wobble, and this is a 1-inch pattern. We'll be placing a dab of the compound at each of the cross-section points. Because it's water-based, it will dry out if you try to do too far ahead or wipe a smear. And we'll just hit each spot consistently until we see the marker, the Sharpie marker, disappear. Then we know that we've cut just enough.
Right. So when you say the wobble dimension, what you're looking for is, even though this is 1 1/4 dowel, what he's saying is that this does a bit of this. It doesn't spin perfectly. And so we did a test piece and found out that even though this is 1 1/4 dowel, that's where he gets the 1.5 inch measurement from, is it leaves 1.5 inch diameter pattern. And again, that's why he picked the inch grid. So
here we're adding the grit to the surface, and we just put in enough to create a swirl pattern. You don't want to use too much, it'll just get flung out. If you use too little, it will overheat and potentially warp things, as well as ruin the end of your dowel.
And I think it's now you're talking about warping things, and you had concerns about a little bit of warpage in the panel, and I told you not to be too concerned about that because we still have to bend all the flanges. And that brings us to another point, and that's that all this has to be done before the flanges are bent into the metal, because you can't do this on a 90-degree bend.
In order to initiate the pattern, you may have to start with half a diameter on an edge. That's not at all uncommon. And likewise, at the end of the pattern, you'll still have to probably put in a half diameter at the edge. We're going to go ahead and fire up the tool here. As you can see, it's not an extremely fast speed. You let the grit do all the work.
So really what you're doing is you're putting the center of the dowel at each of those little crosshairs, and whatever pattern, whatever offset we see is a result of that 2/3 ratio.
Exactly.
And again, it could be 3/4 or whatever. And I've also seen some people do, offsets in between as they go down the rows. But this is demonstrating to us now that that's really totally unnecessary.
Yeah, there's no point in overcomplicating the situation. As long as you've got a bit of overlap between the previous row and this row, and a certain amount of overlap in your pattern as you work across the piece, then you're going to have that nice swirly effect every single time.
And one thing that he did do was he built a little table here, and there's a piece of wood screwed to the bottom of this, and that's clamped into the vise here, and that basically gives you a nice flat area to do it.
Well, if the surface is smooth and shiny, then every single swipe mark or fingerprint or bit of grease or oil is going to show. And it's amazing how much being able to fool the eye with the swirl basically makes all that look so much cleaner and
right.
More.
And you can see that this one, he did turn the other side, but in doing that, he got the compound on The back, yeah. And imagine that being your firewall, and you get a little bit of oil on there.
Yeah, you'd be wiping it every single time you looked at it.
Versus this, you know, and I'm touching it, and on a typical stainless surface, you would see my fingerprints everywhere already, and you simply can't. So it's a pretty legitimate reason to do it, I think.